In the red rock silence of the Arizona desert, where shadows stretch long over ancient cliffs and the wind whispers secrets through stone, legends still stir. The Grand Canyon, carved by time and mystery, is more than a natural wonder. It is a vast and sacred echo chamber, where the spirits of the past have never fully faded. Beneath its layered walls lie not just fossils and geologic marvels, but stories unsettling, strange and stubbornly alive. From forgotten miners and ancient tribal warnings, to spectral figures that roam the rim, the Grand Canyon is a landscape soaked in the spectral. Tourists come for the view, but some leave with something more, a sense of being watched, a voice in the wind, a shadow that shouldn't be there. Today we're bringing 12 haunting legends of Grand Canyon National Park back to life. Stories that still echo across the Colorado River, unsettling those who dare to look too long into the canyon's depths. But be warned, the answers here are not always clear, and some doors once opened never close. The tale begins in the late 1800s, when pioneers and river runners began to push into the remote corridors of Marble Canyon, just upstream from the Grand Canyon's heart. Among the first to vanish without a trace was a young woman named Eleanor, a settler's wife who had grown restless in the stark beauty of the canyon's silence. She was last seen wandering along the river's edge after a quarrel with her husband, clad in a white shift, her bare feet bleeding on the stone. Some claimed she jumped, others whispered her body was never found, because the canyon claimed her. Since then, stories have emerged of a ghostly figure appearing along the rim of Marble Canyon, always near dusk, always alone. She floats rather than walks, her dress billowing in the windless air, her face obscured by tangled black hair. River guides speak of hearing her cries echo off the walls, piercing, mournful, inhuman, a haunting mix of sorrow and rage. In 1937, a hiker named Thomas Kessler recorded in his journal that he awoke to find a woman weeping outside his tent. When he stepped out to help, she vanished, leaving only a puddle of water and a set of wet footprints leading away from the camp and toward a sheer drop. More recently, a Grand Canyon park ranger on a solo patrol swore she saw a woman standing on a cliff's edge. Fearing a suicide attempt, she ran to intervene, only to find nothing but rock and silence. Yet her radio, they say, picked up static and then a voice whispering, "It wasn't my time." Skeptics argue it's no more than desert madness, hallucinations brought on by dehydration or exhaustion. Others claim it's a shared cultural myth, a projection of the loneliness the canyon evokes. But among the Navajo, there's an older belief that the canyon holds spirits who died without peace, and that Eleanor, if that was ever her name, is now one of them. Today, seasoned hikers leave offerings along the Marble Canyon Trail, smooth stones, bits of cloth, or whispered prayers, hoping to soothe the wailing woman's restless soul. But she does not want offerings. She wants to be found, and every year, someone tries. Legend 2, the Hopi Watchers of Desert View. They stand without blinking, silent, still, watching long after you've looked away. Desert View, perched on the canyon's eastern rim, is a place of astonishing beauty, a place where the sky and stone seem to merge into eternity. But the Hopi people have long believed this site to be more than just scenic. It is sacred, a threshold, a place where the worlds of the living and the spirits converge. According to tribal elders, long before European settlers arrived, Hopi guardians were chosen to keep watch over the canyon, a spiritual duty passed down for generations. When these guardians died, it said their spirits remained behind, bound to their sacred task. The earliest written account of the Watchers comes from a Spanish missionary in the 1540s who wrote of tall shadows among the rocks who vanished when approached, yet left no sign of retreat. But the legend intensified in the 1930s after the construction of the Desert View Watchtower, designed by Mary Coulter in homage to Puebloan architecture. Coulter, who worked closely with native consultants, reportedly experienced strange visions during the tower's construction, figures glimpsed from the corner of her eye, and dreams filled with chanting and burning sage. Visitors today still speak of encounters that defy explanation. Tall, indistinct forms seen standing perfectly still along the rim, always just out of reach. One photographer swore he captured the silhouette of a man in traditional Hopi robes, standing on a ledge no human could reach, only for the figure to vanish when the photo was developed. Another hiker reported waking in the middle of the night to see a figure standing at the edge of her campsite, arms folded, head bowed. When she called out, it raised its head, revealing eyes that glowed white in the firelight, and then simply faded into the dark. Park officials chalk these tales up to fatigue or imagination, but to many the watchers are real. They're not ghosts in the traditional sense. They do not speak, do not threaten. They only observe. Locals say that if you linger at Desert View after sunset, and if the air suddenly grows cold even in summer, it means a watcher is near. Some believe they judge those who visit the canyon. Others say they are simply there to protect the land. But whatever their purpose, they remain silent guardians of the rim, watching still. Legend 3. The Phantom Miner of Horseshoe Mesa. He digs where no one should. And when the wind howls through the canyon walls, it sounds like pickaxes on stone. Horseshoe Mesa, a striking plateau jutting into the heart of the Grand Canyon, was once the site of frenzied activity. In the 1890s, copper fever drew prospectors deep into the canyon's unforgiving terrain. Among them was Louis Boucher, known as the Hermit, who built trails, carved out shelters, and vanished into the silence of stone. But Boucher was not the only miner to stake a claim on Horseshoe Mesa. Another man named Lost to Time worked there alone, refusing help, avoiding townsfolk, and obsessively guarding his claim. Some say he struck a rich vein of copper and began to act strangely, talking to himself, staying in the mine long past sundown. Then one day he simply disappeared. Since then, hikers have reported hearing the sharp, steady clink of metal echoing from the mesa's depths, even when no one is there. Park rangers dismiss it as rock falls or shifting debris, but the sound has a rhythm to it, deliberate, like someone still working a forgotten tunnel. In 1961, a group of geology students spent the night near the mesa's old mine shafts. Around midnight they heard footsteps crunching over gravel, then the unmistakable sound of coughing, harsh wheezing, close. One of them shone a flashlight into the dark and saw a man in old mining clothes, hunched over, pick in hand. But as they approached, the figure backed into the shadows and vanished. They found no track. Decades later, a park volunteer scouting the area alone claimed he found a shaft that didn't appear on any map. When he tried to return the next day, it was gone, collapsed or hidden. But in his report, he described a rusted pickaxe left leaning against a rock, and fresh copper ore scattered on the ground, as though someone had been digging. Some say the phantom miner was driven mad by solitude, cursed to work the earth for eternity. Others believe he made a pact, offering his soul for riches and failing to escape the debt. Even now, the Horseshoe Mesa Trail warns visitors of steep cliffs, unstable ground, and extreme isolation. But those who've heard the midnight mining say there's another danger, one that swings a pick in the dark and never stopped digging. Long before Grand Canyon National Park became a destination for tourists and hikers, it was a place of treacherous allure, a vast, unmapped wilderness rumored to hide rivers of gold and sacred relics. In the late 1700s, a small group of Spanish missionaries and explorers, led by Father Silvestre Vélez de Escalante and Francisco Atanasio Dominguez, ventured into the region seeking a passage to California. Though the main party turned back, tales emerged of a breakaway expedition. 4 men who defied orders and pressed deeper into the canyon's southern reaches. They were never seen again. According to local Havasupai and Hopi oral histories, strange foreign men were seen entering a narrow gorge west of present-day Havasu Falls. The people warned them not to continue, that the canyon ahead was a sacred place, guarded by spirits and cursed to outsiders. The explorers scoffed and continued. What happened next is the heart of the legend. Over the centuries, rumors persisted of a sunken Spanish camp somewhere deep within a side canyon of swords, rusted into the ground, a silver crucifix hanging from a blackened tree, and stone markers etched with crosses. In 1909, a controversial newspaper article claimed that a lost Spanish chamber filled with mummified remains and ancient artifacts had been found hidden in a remote cave near Marble Canyon, then swiftly covered up. Modern explorers have searched for these supposed remains and found nothing, but the canyon keeps its secrets well. In 1972, a backpacker reported a chilling encounter. While exploring a secluded slot canyon, he found what appeared to be an old boot buried in silt, stitched in a way unlike anything sold in the last century. He also found claw marks etched into the sandstone walls, deep, ragged, and running high overhead. More disturbing were his dreams afterward. For weeks, he claimed, he saw visions of men in armor wandering the canyon, lost, sunburnt, their mouths moving in silent prayer, and their eyes hollow with dread. Some believe the spirits of the lost Dominguez men still wander the Grand Canyon, cursed by the land they tried to claim. Others think they found something they weren't meant to see, and were taken by the canyon itself. Whatever the truth, the legend endures like the stone around it, ancient, unmoved, and ready to whisper again when the sun goes low and the shadows run deep. Legend 5. The Shapeshifter of Supai. It wears many faces, but none of them are human. Deep within the Havasupai Indian Reservation, nestled at the bottom of the canyon where turquoise waterfalls spill into red rock pools, lies the village of Supai. It is one of the most isolated communities in the United States, accessible only by foot, mule, or helicopter, and it is here that the elders speak, quietly and carefully, of the Yi Naldlushi, the skinwalker. This legend, rooted in Navajo and Hopi tradition, tells of a dark spirit capable of taking the form of animals, or even people. It is not just a tale for campfires, but a warning spoken in hushed tones and never lightly. In the canyon, it is said that the skinwalker moves silently through the cottonwoods, slipping between shadow and starlight, mimicking voices and footfall to lure travelers away from the path. The first written account came from a Bureau of Indian Affairs agent in 1913, who reported that local guides refused to travel at night near certain parts of the canyon, citing a creature that walked like a man, but whose eyes glowed like fire. He dismissed it as superstition. 2 weeks later, his mule was found torn apart at the edge of a bluff, and he abandoned his post without explanation. Stories persisted. In 1984, a pair of backpackers claimed they were followed for hours along the Havasu Creek Trail. They heard what sounded like a child crying in the distance, but the canyon ahead was empty, and the sound circled them as if coming from the cliffs. That night, they awoke to find footprints, bare human-like, but too long and with claws, circling their tent in the sand. More recently, a park employee camping near Supai Creek described waking to the sound of heavy breathing just outside his tent. He called out, "No answer," just the sound of something slowly dragging itself through gravel. When he looked outside with a flashlight, there was nothing there, but in the morning his fire pit had been scattered, and a long gray hair, too coarse for human, was found inside his sleeping bag. Skeptics point to coyotes, hallucinations, or local lore, but among the Havasupai and Navajo, the belief is deeper. Some say the creature is a cursed shaman, transformed through forbidden ritual. Others believe it is a guardian, testing the hearts of those who enter sacred ground. Either way, one rule is always repeated: don't speak its name aloud after dark. To name it is to call it. And in Supai, the shadows listen. Legend 6. The Whispering Winds of Torowep. Overlook. They don't just howl, they speak. At the edge of Torowep Overlook, a remote, dizzying perch high above the Colorado River, visitors often fall silent, not from the view, though it is breathtaking, but from something else, a sound, faint, eerie, always just on the edge of hearing, a murmur carried on the canyon winds that seems almost human. The Paiute people, who have lived near this land for centuries, speak of the wind spirits, restless voices of those who died in the canyon, carried forever through the air. According to their oral tradition, Torowep is a place where the boundary between the worlds is thin, a site not just of beauty but of reckoning. In 1907, a rancher named Amos Rowley set up a remote homestead near Torowep Valley. He claimed the winds kept him awake at night, not with their force, but with their he described hearing laughter, sobbing, and sometimes singing, though no one else was around for miles. His journals, discovered decades later, mention a specific refrain he heard over and over: "Don't turn around." Tourists have since reported similar experience. A woman from Phoenix visiting in 1996 claimed she heard her deceased mother's voice call her name while standing at the overlook. She turned, expecting to see someone, only to find herself alone, with the wind rising in a sudden deafening gust. In 2003, a team of geology students camped at Torowep for a research trip. That night, one of them recorded audio as the group sat around their fire. When they played it back later, beneath the wind and rustle of the flames, they heard whispers, clearly human voice. One repeated the same word over and over: "Jump." Skeptics suggest the unique acoustics of the canyon can create auditory illusions, bouncing sounds for miles or blending wind with the echoes of nature. But the consistency of these accounts, and the specificity of the words reported, has led some to believe there's more at work. Today, a few travelers still brave the journey to Torowep's edge, but locals advise never visiting alone. And if the wind starts to whisper, don't listen too closely, because once you understand what it's saying, it might not stop. Legend 7. The Howling Coyote of Hermit Trail. One voice, many forms, and always behind you. Hermit Trail, carved into the western rim of the Grand Canyon, descends steeply through layers of rock, history, and some say something far older than either. It was once the path of Louis Boucher, the famed hermit of the Grand Canyon, who lived alone in the canyon's solitude for nearly 2 decades at the turn of the 20th century. But not all who walk that trail do so alone. Hikers have long told stories of a lone coyote that seems to appear without warning near dusk, watching from ledges above, or sitting silently in the trail's middle, blocking passage. Its eyes are too bright, its behavior too human. Some who've seen it swear it grins. Others report something far stranger. The Navajo speak of Micah, the coyote spirit, a trickster and shapeshifter known for luring people astray, leading them into canyons from which they never return. And Hermit Trail, with its narrow switchbacks and long shadows, has proven ripe for such tales. In 1948, a hiker named Dean Harrison was found days after going missing on the trail. Dazed, dehydrated, and mumbling nonsense, he claimed he had followed a man with a tail through a side canyon. He spoke of illusions, voices that sounded like friends calling from ahead, glimpses of familiar faces in the stone. Then he laughed, stopped suddenly, and never spoke of it again. In 1979, a pair of hikers from Flagstaff reported hearing what sounded like a pack of coyotes just past sunset, yelps and howls that circled them like a spiral, but there were no tracks. The next morning, one of their backpacks had been shredded, ripped apart, but with food untouched. A claw mark was gouged into a nearby rock 6 inches across. Park rangers now advise extreme caution on Hermit Trail, not just for the steep drop-offs and unstable terrain, but because something else might be walking it with you. Some say the coyote only shows itself to those burdened by guilt or regret. Others believe it is Boucher himself, transformed by solitude and still guiding or misleading travelers through his beloved canyon. But one detail remains in nearly every account: the sound, a howl that begins soft and low behind you, and ends beside your ear. But below even the river level, beneath the sandstone and silence, lies a network of caverns, so vast and strange they've sparked one of the canyon's most persistent and most unsettling legends. It begins with a 1909 article in the Arizona Gazette, which claimed that an explorer named Kincaid working under the Smithsonian Institution, had discovered a hidden cave in Marble Canyon, filled with Egyptian-like artifacts, tablets, idols, weapons, even mummies. The report vanished as quickly as it appeared. The Smithsonian denied any knowledge. The location was never confirmed, but whispers began. Since then, rumors have persisted of hidden caverns sealed by landslides or hidden behind false walls, caves that go deeper than any known geology should allow. In the 1970s, a spelunker named Ray Sloan claimed to have discovered a vertical shaft near the south rim that descended for over 200 feet, only to widen into a vast chamber filled with strange carvings and petrified bones too large for any known animal. His photos were mysteriously overexposed. When he returned with a group weeks later, the entrance was gone, collapsed or deliberately sealed. More recent explorers tell of hearing strange echoes in unmapped side canyons. Echoes that don't bounce back naturally but seem to answer. One hiker near Tanner Trail in 2004 reported voices in the stone, a low chanting, rhythmic and hypnotic. He followed it into a cleft in the rock and emerged hours later confused and sunburned with no memory of where he'd been. Native tribes have long spoken of the lower world, a sacred realm beneath the earth where ancient spirits reside. Some believe these caverns are not natural at all, but doorways into that hidden place, sealed by those who knew what waited beyond. Geologists dismiss the idea of an underground civilization, but the canyon is still revealing itself. New caves are discovered almost every year. Most are shallow, narrow, but a few go deeper than they should, and in those depths, according to legend, the earth is not silent, it breathes. Legend 9. The River Man of the Colorado. He moves with the current, and those who see him don't always return. Beneath the soaring cliffs and scorching sun, the Colorado River flows through the Grand Canyon like a living artery. To many it's a source of life and awe, but to those who've spent years guiding rafts through its twists and rapids, there's a different tale, a darker one, told in low tones when the fire burns low. They call him the River Man. The story goes back to 1869. When John Wesley Powell led the first documented expedition down the Colorado River. One of his men, a scout named Goodman, disappeared one morning, after claiming he'd seen someone walking on the water at dawn, barefoot, tall and silent. Powell's journal entry was brief, almost dismissive. Goodman, it said, fell victim to the heat, but Goodman's body was never found. Over the decades, sightings accumulated. A lone figure walking the banks at night, always upstream. He wears old-fashioned clothes, sometimes tattered, sometimes pristine. He never speaks, and he leaves no footprints, even in wet sand. In 1956, during a rafting expedition near Lava Falls, a guide named Ed Mason vanished in calm water. The only witness, his daughter, claimed he had stared off mid-sentence and whispered, "He's here." Then he stepped off the raft and disappeared beneath the surface without a splash. The search lasted days. No body was ever recovered. Modern reports continue. In 1993, a national park employee camping near Crystal Rapids said she saw someone standing waist-deep in the current, facing upstream as if defying the flow. She shined a flashlight, but the figure vanished. Minutes later, a low moaning sound filled the canyon, so deep it shook the tent poles. Some say the River Man is a drowned soul, who walks until the canyon gives him peace. Others believe he is a guardian, dragging the unworthy beneath the surface. But a few old river guides offer a different view. They say he's a memory made flesh. A man who's been watching the river for so long, the river started watching back. Today, some rafters leave offerings near the water's edge before beginning their journey. Coins, bread, even folded letters. Not to ward him off, to ask him not to follow. Because if you see the River Man once, you may never float in silence again. On the north rim of the Grand Canyon, far less traveled and more secluded than the bustling south rim, lies the Walhalla Plateau, a place of wild beauty, ancient ruins and a strange, chilling sound that rises without warning. Locals call them the Screaming Cliff. The phenomenon has been known for generations. In the 1800s, early Mormon settlers spoke of unexplainable wails heard echoing from the cliffs near Cape Royal. These weren't the howls of wind or animals. They were human, piercing, desperate, filled with terror. The settlers believed it was the punishment of souls who jumped from the rim, unable to find peace. The Havasupai and Paiute, however, have a different name for it, the Mourning Stone. According to tribal elders, the cliffs are where spirits weep for the broken balance between land and people, where the cries of those who died with unfinished purpose still echo across the stone. In 1935, a botanist named Harold Jensen vanished near the plateau while on a solo research trip. Days later, a search party found his journal. The last entry read, "The screaming has started again. It knows I'm here. I saw a woman on the edge, her mouth open but no sound." His body was never recovered. In recent years, hikers and campers have continued to report eerie cries after sundown, long anguished howls that start faint and build until they seem to shake the tree. One couple in 2015 fled their campsite after hearing what they described as a scream that circled the sky for nearly 30 minutes, though no other humans were nearby. The park attributes it to natural acoustics, how wind funnels through the ravines and amplifies sound. But those who've heard it say there's something different in its tone, a message, a warning. Some believe the screams are a lure, pulling the curious toward the rim, hypnotizing them with sorrow. Others think it's the canyon itself grieving for the lives lost to time, greed, or carelessness. Either way, when the sun sets over Walhalla and the stone begins to sing, even the bravest hikers keep their distance. Because once you've heard the scream, you'll never unhear it. Legend 11, the shadow of the watchtower. It stands still, but its shadow moves. At Desert View, on the canyon's eastern rim, the iconic watchtower rises like an ancient sentinel, designed in the 1930s by architect Mary Coulter, inspired by Native American structures. Inside, murals by Hopi artist Fred Caboti adorn the walls, honoring the land's deep spiritual roots. But for all its beauty, the watchtower holds a secret many visitors overlook. Its shadow doesn't always follow the sun. According to decades of accounts, whispered by park staff and written in the margins of ranger logs, the watchtower casts a shadow in directions that defy logic. In the morning, it points west. By noon, it leans east. Sometimes it shifts while no clouds move, no wind blows. The legend began in 1941, when a Navajo guide named Sebiaji, Little Rock, refused to enter the watchtower. He said the spirits it honored were not at rest. That night, campers near Desert View reported seeing a tall human-shaped shadow stretch from the tower's base, despite the full moon overhead. The figure moved against the light. In 1968, a tourist snapped a series of photos of the tower during sunset. In the last frame, a dark silhouette stood at the tower's top, a figure with no visible features, arms outstretched. Park rangers dismissed it as a trick of the light. But the shadow wasn't in the previous frame. More recently, in 2019, a ranger working a night shift near Desert View reported lights flickering in the empty tower. When he approached, he saw what he described as a long shadow falling in the wrong direction, climbing the rock like a spider. The lights went dark. He transferred out of the park a week later. Skeptics argue these stories are illusions, refractions caused by the canyon's unique atmosphere. Others believe the watchtower is more than a monument, that its design, steeped in ritual and reverence, opened a door. Some say the shadow belongs to an ancient guardian, awakened by those who failed to respect the canyon's spirit. Others believe it's the memory of something older, something that watched this place long before the tower stood. Whatever it is, one rule is constant in the stories: don't look into the shadow, because sometimes it looks back. Legend 12, the canyon time slip. The air thickens, the light dims, and suddenly, time forgets where it is. Deep in the western reaches of Grand Canyon National Park, near the less traveled region known as Shinumo Wash, there's a phenomenon spoken of rarely, and only by those who've seen it. It is not a ghost, not a beast. It is a fracture, a tear in the veil between what was and what is. The locals call it the canyon time slip. First whispered in the journals of mid-century prospectors and passed along in murmured conversations between park veterans, the legend tells of a strange zone, no wider than a football field, where time unspools, watches stop, GPS scrambles. But more disturbing than the malfunction of machines are the stories from people who've stepped into that stillness. In 1952, a river runner named Carl Rubin disappeared for 2 days. When he returned, sunburnt and dazed, he insisted he'd been gone only 15 minutes. He described walking into a patch of canyon where everything went silent. No birds, no wind, no echo. He said he saw ancient dwellings on the cliffs that weren't there before, and figures standing motionless near the river, dressed in hides and holding torches that burned without flame. In 1986, a pair of hikers reported being lost near Shinumo Creek. Their map no longer matched the terrain. Arches of stone appeared where none should be, and the sky took on a grayish hue despite the sun. When they emerged the next morning, they found themselves several miles from where they'd entered the canyon, and their photos from that night were all blank, save one, which showed a row of shadowed figures silhouetted against the canyon wall. More recently, in 2011, a solo hiker with a GoPro accidentally recorded nearly an hour of static and garbled voices, his own voice speaking in a language he later insisted he did not know. Park geologists dismiss the idea as nonsense, yet they've quietly noted magnetic anomalies in the area, odd compass readings, inexplicable temperature shifts. Native elders, when asked, simply say, "That part of the canyon remembers," and in a place where stone holds memories millions of years old. Perhaps the canyon time slip is not a distortion, but a revelation, a moment when the past leaks through, and the land shows you what it once was and what it still is beneath the surface. Those who've seen it don't talk much afterward, maybe because they came back with a part of themselves left behind.